Don't bother with him. He's just a broken old soul." A chilling whisper slithered through the darkness. The Navy SEAL stood unmoved. 24 hours later, helicopter blades tear the sky. What you're about to witness will defy all expectations. Are you ready? What does true courage look like? What does real sacrifice feel like? The men and women who give everything, do we even understand their price? If this story moves you, if it stirs something deep inside, leave a 1 in the comments below. Pay tribute to those who give without asking. Reynolds moved silently through the forest, his footsteps barely disturbing the morning dew at 42. His body still carried the disciplined posture of his Navy SEAL days, though his eyes now held a quieter kind of vigilance. 3 years into civilian life, these dawn hikes had become his sanctuary, a place where the memories couldn't find him so easily. The morning light filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows across the forest floor. Jack paused his trained senses, detecting something unusual. 20 yards ahead, an elderly man stood disoriented, clutching a worn map with trembling hands. His clothes, once neat, were now disheveled, and his face bore the unmistakable exhaustion of someone who had spent the night outdoors, unprepared. "Are you all right?" Jack called softly, approaching with measured steps, the old man's startled relief washing over his weathered face. Thank God he breathed. "I've been walking in circles since yesterday afternoon." Jack reached him, noting the military bearing that age couldn't erase. "I'm Jack Reynolds," he said, extending his hand. "George Winters," the man replied, his grip surprisingly firm. Korean War Twid Infantry Division, though that was a lifetime ago. He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Foolish of me to come out here alone. I just wanted to find the old training grounds before I couldn't anymore." Jack nodded, understanding immediately. Some places pulled at you that way, demanded to be revisited, remembered. "Let him get you out of here, sir. I know these trails well." As Jack offered his canteen, George's embarrassment was palpable. "I should have known better at my age. We all make mistakes." Jack assured him the forest doesn't discriminate. Takes the young and fit just as easily as anyone. They had been walking for nearly an hour when voices carried through the trees, a camping group. 5 men and 2 women came into view around a bend in the trail. Jack raised his hand in greeting. "Excuse me," he called. "We could use some assistance. This gentleman got separated from his group yesterday." A tall man with an expensive hiking outfit stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he assessed George. "What's an old-timer like him doing out here? Anyway," he scoffed, "these trails aren't for senior citizens playing explorer." Jack felt his jaw tighten. "Cheque, a veteran just visiting veteran," interrupted another man, laughing. "What from the Civil War?" George's shoulders slumped visibly, his gaze dropping to the ground. "We're just asking if anyone has a working phone," Jack said evenly. "Ours are dead," the tall man. Clearly the group's self-appointed leader smirked. "Not our problem. Maybe next time Grandpa should stick to the retirement home activities." The others laughed, all except one younger man at the back who looked uncomfortable. "Come on, Brad," one of the women said. "We're burning daylight standing here talking to these losers." They pushed past, deliberately bumping George's shoulder, causing him to stumble. Jack caught him by the elbow, steadying him without a word. "I'm sorry about that, George," whispered Shame, coloring his voice. "You should go on ahead. I'm just slowing you down." Jack watched the retreating backs of the camping group, his face impassive, despite the anger. Building inside him, he'd faced enemy fire with less contempt than what these civilians had just shown a man who had served his country. "No, sir," Jack said firmly. "We go together, or not at all. That's how it works." George looked up, something flickering in his tired eyes. recognition perhaps of the code Jack was invoking, the unspoken brotherhood that existed between those who had worn the uniform. "Thank you, son," he said quietly. Jack nodded his hand, still supporting George's elbow, as they continued their slow progress through the increasingly dense forest. Behind them, the laughter of the camping group faded, but the sting of their words lingered in the silence between the two men. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Jack and George reached a small clearing. George's breathing had become labored, each step more difficult than the last. Jack noticed the older man's lips were cracked from dehydration. "Leighton, rest here," Jack suggested, helping George to a fallen log. He checked his canteen. Less than a quarter remained. He handed it to George. Small sips. "Sir," George took the canteen with shaking hands. "You need it more than I do. I've gone 3 days without water. In war heat than this," Jack said matter-of-factly, training. "Sir, please drink," as George reluctantly sipped. Voices approached again. Jack looked up to see the same camping group entering the clearing from another trail. They had apparently circled back to this common rest area. "Well, look who it is. The leader," Brad announced loudly. The geriatric hiker and his babysitter Jack ignored them, focusing instead on George's condition. The older man's color wasn't good, and Jack was growing concerned about heat exhaustion. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Brad persisted, stepping closer. "You two planning to call in a helicopter rescue? Make the Rangers risk their necks because Grandpa bit off more than he could chew." The rest of the group had settled nearby, watching the exchange with varying degrees of amusement and discomfort. "We'll be moving on shortly," Jack replied calmly. "No need for concern." Brad snorted. "Concern? That's rich. You know how many idiots like you to end up needing rescue every year. Taxpayer dollars wasted on people who have no business being out here." George attempted to stand. "Young man, there's no need. Sit down, old-timer." Brad snapped. "Nobody asked you!" Jack placed a restraining hand on George's shoulder, keeping his voice level. "We just passing through, no trouble." Brad's eyes narrowed, sensing Jack's controlled demeanor as a challenge. He reached down and grabbed Jack's canteen from beside George. "How much water you got left?" "Not much, huh?" He unscrewed the cap and deliberately poured the remaining water onto the ground. "Oops. Guess you'll have to manage without. Let's see how you two survive now." The water soaked quickly into the parched earth. George watched with dismay, while Jack remained perfectly still. His expression unchanged around them. The other hikers shifted, did uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. A woman in the group looked like she wanted to say something, but then glanced at Brad and remained silent. The younger man at the back turned away, unable to watch. "You should be thanking me," Brad continued, tossing the empty canteen at Jack's feet, "teaching you a valuable lesson about wilderness preparedness." Jack slowly bent down and picked up the canteen, securing it back to his belt without comment. Nothing to say. "Tough guy," Brad taunted George's hands, trembled not from fear, but from indignation. Decades ago, he would have stood up to this bully without hesitation. Now he felt the weight of his years like never before. Jack simply placed his hand on George's shoulder. "We should keep moving, sir. There's a stream about 2 miles ahead," as they stood to leave. Brad stepped directly in their path. "Maybe we should make sure these two don't get lost again. Wouldn't want to read about them in tomorrow's obituaries." His friends laughed nervously, the joke crossing a line. Even they recognized. Jack met Brad's gaze steadily but said nothing. He simply guided George around the obstacle and continued on their way. The weight of unspoken words hanging in the air behind them, the afternoon stretched into evening as Jack and George made slow progress through the forest. They had found the stream Jack mentioned, replenished their water, but George's condition was was deteriorating. His steps were unsteady, and Jack now supported much of his weight. "We should make camp soon," Jack said. "Scanning the area for a suitable location. It'll be dark in an hour." George nodded weakly. "I'm sorry to be such a burden." "Son." "You're not a burden, sir," Jack replied firmly. "We're just adapting to the situation. They found a small protected area beneath a rocky overhang." Jack efficiently gathered materials for a small fire. His movements precise and practiced as the flames took hold, casting warm light against the growing darkness. George watched with quiet admiration. "You move like someone who's done this many times before," he observed. Jack nodded. "Part of the job." "What branch were you?" George asked. "Navy SEAL, Team 6. George's eyebrows raised slightly. "That's impressive." Jack shrugged. "Just did what needed doing." The sound of approaching footsteps silenced their conversation. Jack tensed, positioning himself between George and the potential threat. A beam of light cut through the trees, followed by the figure of the younger man from the camping group. "Hello," the man called tentatively. "I saw your fire." Jack remained silent, assessing the young man, stepped into the firelight, hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm. "I'm Sergeant Michael Reeves, 75th. Your regiment? The 1st wanted to make sure you two were okay." Jack relaxed marginally, but remained vigilant. "We're managing." Michael nodded, then looked more closely at Jack. His expression changed. Suddenly, stagnation. "Dawning weight are you?" "Commander Reynolds. Jack Reynolds." Jack's face remained impassive. That was a long time ago. Michael's posture straightened instinctively. "Sir, when I served under Colonel Matthews in Kahar, he told us about Operation Shadowfall, about what you did." George looked between the two men, confusion evident on his face. "You saved 16 men that day." "Sir," Michael continued, his voice filled with reverence. "Colonel Matthews said it was the bravest thing he'd ever witnessed." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "That's not a story for tonight." Sergeant Michael turned to George. "And you, sir? You served as well?" George nodded. "Korea Twid Infantry Division. Nothing special." Michael's eyes widened. "The Chosen Reservoir." George looked surprised. "Yes. How did you?" "My grandfather was there too. He told me stories about the frozen Chosen my whole life." Michael's voice softened. "You men faced temperatures of 40, below outnumbered 5-1 by Chinese forces. And you held the line? The forest seemed to grow quieter, as if listening to the history being spoken. Into the night, I came to apologize," Michael said, his gaze dropping for Brad and the others. "They don't understand." Footsteps approached again, and the entire camping group emerged from the darkness, led by Brad. Their expressions had changed uncertainty, replacing the earlier arrogance. "Reeves, what are you doing?" Brad began, then stopped short when he saw the scene by the fire. Michael turned to face his friends. "This is Commander Jack Reynolds." Navy SEAL Team 6. He led one of the most successful hostage rescue operations in Afghanistan. He gestured to George, and this is a veteran of the Korean War, one of the frozen Chosen who fought at the Chosen Reservoir. Brad's face drained of color. One of the women gasped softly. "The commander here has received the Navy Cross." Michael continued, "That's second, only to the Medal of Honor." Jack stood his voice, quiet but commanding. "That's enough." Sergeant Brad stepped forward hesitantly. "We didn't know you weren't supposed to," Jack replied simply. George struggled to his feet, standing as straight as his aged body would allow. Despite his exhaustion, there was dignity in his bearing that commanded respect. Brad looked at the ground, then at his companions, shame evident on their faces. "We have extra supplies," he offered awkwardly. "Food. Water. Blankets. Please let us help." Jack and George exchanged glances of silent communication between men who understood that sometimes pride must yield to practicality. "We appreciate," that Jack finally said. as the camping group bustled about setting up a proper camp and sharing their supplies. George leaned close to Jack. "Funny how quickly people change when they learn who you really are," he murmured. Jack nodded. "It's not about the recognition, sir. It never was." Dawn broke over the forest painting, the sky in hues of orange and gold. Jack stood at the edge of the clearing, watching as George shared coffee with Michael and the now subdued camping group. The night had transformed them all in subtle ways. A distant sound caught Jack's attention, the rhythmic thump of helicopter blades. He tilted his head, listening intently. "Someone's coming," he announced. Within minutes, the sound grew louder. The trees above them swayed as a military helicopter appeared overhead, hovering before finding a suitable landing spot in a nearby clearing. Brad looked confused. Did someone call for rescue? Jack shook his head, his eyes on George, who was smiling faintly. Two uniformed officers emerged from the helicopter and approached. The group they spotted George immediately and saluted General Winters when called out. "Auk, we've been searching for you since yesterday, sir." The camping group froze, eyes widening as they turned to stare at Georgian. Brad whispered. George stood returning the salute with practiced ease. "I apologize for the trouble. Captain lost track of time and direction." "No apology necessary, sir. The secretary was concerned when you missed the ceremony." George nodded, then turned to Jack. "I couldn't have survived without this man's help." The officers looked at Jack, recognition dawning in their eyes. Commander Reynolds. One said respectfully, as George prepared to leave, the entire camping group stood silently, a spontaneous gesture of respect. Brad stepped forward awkwardly. "Sir, we were sorry." George regarded him thoughtfully. "Some lessons are learned the hard way, son." He turned to Jack, extending his hand. "Thank you, Commander." Jack took it firmly. No words were needed between them as the helicopter lifted off, carrying George back to the world that remembered his service. The group watched in silence. Michael moved to stand beside Jack. "Some heroes never seek the spotlight, they stand in silence. Their stories unheard. We carry the weight of their legacy. It is our duty to honor them. Their sacrifices echo through eternity. Even when they ask for nothing in return, we owe them everything. Believe in kindness and honor. Believe these values must never fade. Hit subscribe. Keep their light alive forever."